Don Fischer, the voice of the Hoosiers, with us. And Don, I know it's not ever fun coming off of the games for you that like this past one, as much effort as you put into the games. And sometimes it seems like you're putting in more effort than the guys on the floor. And I don't mean that as to crack on anybody, but man, that the second half in a game that you give up 52 points at home, especially in one in which you had played pretty well in the first half, at least we were talking in the break from a statistical standpoint. If somebody looks at those stats, they're going to go, okay, things are going in the right direction. You've got a guy who has been perfect from the field in the first half. He already has. What did Kilauea have in the first half? 16, 17 points. I mean, wow, what a game for most people that he had in the first half. Renew was playing well, but Penn State was giving up the paint. They're like, okay, we're not going to win on that, but we can beat you 3-2, and which is basically what they did.
Well, and think about this. Khalil Ware barely touches the ball in the second half in comparison to the first half. I mean, he has 17 first-half points. He scores 8 in the second half. And I think a couple of those were off of shots that were missed, and he rebounded them and slammed them back home. It was not the second half was just they destroyed themselves with the way that they played. No energy, no fight, can't guard the three-point line. We've seen this before this year. This is not the first time it's happened. We've seen this before, a team that can't put two halves together. The inconsistency with which this team plays this year is why they are getting beat most of the time, because they've shown that they can play some pretty sound basketball at times. But the lack of consistency in that regard is the most troubling aspect of what we're seeing from this ball club right now. That and the fact that you have to come out and have energy to start a ball game and to start a second half. And we have seen evidence of the fact that they don't do that all the time. It's one of those things that is befuddling, to say the least. It's a ball club that is really hard to read at times. You don't know what their motivation is or if they are motivated. And there's a pride factor involved here. That I think is lacking for this basketball team. Yes, injuries have been a factor, but they are not the biggest factor. The biggest factor is this team's own personality. And this team's personality right now is not good, and it's not going to be getting better, especially with a week in which you haven't won but one road game this year. That was the Michigan ball game. And obviously, when you play on the road, you've got to develop your own energy level. They did that against Illinois a week ago, or a little over a week ago. They did it against Illinois, and they played tough. But can they do it again in what's going to be an environment that's that team's struggling too? And it'll be interesting to see how many fans show up at Valley City Arena coming up on Tuesday night, because without question, their team has really had a problem since Indiana beat them the last time. They were 12-2 when Indiana beat them the first time they played them this year. And it was the second game back, I believe, for Xavier Johnson for Indiana, who had his best game since he came back from the injury. And now he's back out hurt again. Not that he's the answer to any of Indiana's problems at this point, because he's not been consistent with his performances either. Malik Renew, I was stunned that he played in the game against Penn State, because when he went down against Iowa, I thought there's little chance he'll be back for the next ball game, no matter what kind of treatment he gets. And yet he gets out there and guts through the number of minutes that he played. He did get in a little foul trouble, and he didn't look as mobile as he normally does out there, but he gutted it out. I'll give him credit for just playing hard. But we got nothing from the bench in this ball game. Anthony had such a great ball game. Anthony Leal, we're talking about in the matchup against Iowa, and played great. He couldn't get it going in this contest. Anthony Walker doesn't play a second in the second half, if my memory is correct. I don't think he saw the floor in the second half, and he's been their most consistent bench player so far this season. So I don't know what's going on there. All I know is right now this team is in a world of hurt, And it's not going to get any better this week with a road game at Ohio State and a road game at Purdue.
No, especially Purdue coming off of a gigantic win for them, probably a Big Ten championship sealer that I call it. They won at Wisconsin over the weekend in a very, very tough battle, which is good for them in a couple of ways. Number one, it shows that they can beat the tough teams, and that they are, without question, they're better than they were last year. So, but that's another discussion. Yeah, Malik Ware, 17 points in the first half, 6 of 6 overall, 1 of 1. He hit his only 3-point attempt. He hit all 4 free throws. And this is a game in which Indiana shot very well from the free throw line, and they're one of the worst in the country. And so in this game, actually, normally, I just said that you're not going to win when when the team is shooting threes to your twos. But in this particular game, Indiana was doing so well in the paint that may have been a different scenario had they went to Ware and Renew as much in the second half as they did the first half. And for whatever reason, they don't. Both of those guys, Ware had 8 points in the second half, Renew with just 7. Both of them had more in the first half. And for whatever reason, Indiana decides that they have to chuck up 10 3-pointers, which I understand, but they're only hitting 2 of those. They don't have the guys to hit those shots, and they were getting success down low. And I think that they probably should have maintained that, because it would have kept them there, because they were hitting free throws so well.
But here's the whole point. Indiana's defense was not good. I mean, can't guard the 3-point line again. I mean, and it's happened over and over and over again this year. There have been games where they've been able to stop 3-point shooting, and they've gotten out on shooters. But in this game, and give Penn State credit, they're not a great 3-point shooting team, but man, they looked like they were gangbusters in this one. They knocked down 12 of 22. I mean, and that's just people not being guarded. It's pretty simple. You've got to guard somebody, and obviously Indiana wasn't getting out on those shooters. And Jameel Brown comes in off the bench for Penn State. I think he hit 3 3-pointers in that contest. Am I right about that? Let me look here real quick. No,
4.
He hit 4. He hit
4 of 5, no less. He only misses 1.
Exactly. I mean, look at their percentages on the other guys. Hicks was at 4 of 8, 3 of 5 for Baldwin, and 4 of 5 for Brown. So the primary guys in their ball club that knocked down threes, they kicked Indiana's tail in that regard. And that's just not getting out on people. This team right now has no momentum, none. And they're going to have to rebuild that somehow, some way, if they're going to have a chance at Ohio State. And then, of course, they got to go to Mackey Arena on Saturday, where we know it will be absolute bedlam in that facility, and Indiana's chances in that ball game, even though they won there last year. This is not the same ball club by any stretch of the imagination, and it could be a bloodbath if they don't have the right personality going in that ball game.
I hate to say this, but it could be one of the worst losses. Indiana's already given up the most in the last game. That was the biggest point differential in I forget now what the stat was, but a long time. And it could be worse up in Mackey Arena, because Indiana's a wounded animal, and they see that. And unfortunately, Indiana is not reacted like a wounded animal in a corner. They're just kind of laying there, and you hate to say that about anybody, but man, it is what it is, and there's no point in lying about it.
Well, my hope is that they play like they did against Illinois. If they do that in both these ball games, they'll have a chance. But if they don't, they'll have no chance, because you know that Ohio State's a wounded animal. They're 3 and 8 in Big Ten play. They're down at the bottom right now. And Chris Holtmann and his team, I guarantee you, will come up with a little fire in their eyes, knowing that this is a game they feel like they can win. So it's going to be a challenge this week. There's just no question about that. I think this Indiana team has proven at times that they are capable of rising to the occasion. But right now, this team can't afford to continue this kind of basketball if they hope to have any chance at all just to get to the Big Ten tournament, to play outside of the first day. That's the last thing you want, is to have to play in the first day of the Big Ten tournament.
Well, not only that, and if this were next year, they would be fighting to get into the Big Ten tournament, Don, and that would be probably the biggest embarrassment yet for an Indiana team to not even qualify for the Big Ten tournament. And I know this is not next year, but it's worth talking about, because that is where this team is. And it's like, wow, to not be able to even qualify for your own conference tournament, that there are a lot of questions that are needing to be answered.
There's no question about that. The questions are a myriad of questions that need to be answered at this point. But look, I'm not going to sit here at this juncture of the season and say that Indiana's through, that it's over. It's not. But this ball club has to understand that they can't take a day off in regard to how hard they play. They can't take a half off in regard to how hard they play. What happened in the second half of this game against Penn State just can't happen again. If it does, this team will – I mean, look, they're not going to be favored in any game the rest of the season, probably. Based on the
only one they were favored in was the Penn State game.
Right. And that's saying something about where we're at right now with this team, because Indiana's always favored at home, always favored at home, no matter who they play. And granted, they weren't favored against Purdue this year, but it's rare when Indiana's not favored in a home ball game. And right now, they're predicting that Indiana won't be favored in any games this year, so the rest of the season. So this team has some work to do, and I think most of it has to do with looking themselves in the mirror.
Yeah, and for the Indiana fans, it's hard because they've been waiting. Indiana fans are, without question, to me, I know that there are, if not the greatest, some of the absolute greatest, because they stay there. Like right now, they're still there. They're pissed off, but they're there. Back in 2008, when around 2008, when this team was 6-25, they were there. So Indiana has so much built in and going for it. It is unbelievable to continue to see the inability to rise up and even be competitive.
Yeah, it is a problem. There's no question. Can Mike Woodson get this team turned around? I think he's capable of doing that, but we've got to see it. We've got to see evidence of it. And right now, this Ohio State game may be that evidence that we need. Hopefully it is, because Ohio State's eminently beatable. They're playing poor basketball. Chris Holtman's team has struggled this year,
and he's on the hot seat.
Yeah, I mean, whether he should be or not is beside the point.
Right,
because he's had some pretty good years at Ohio State. It's just now last year was not very good, and this year it's turning into another one of those. And usually when that happens, you are on the hot seat, to say the least. So we'll just have to wait and see how this all plays out. All I can tell you right now is this game against Ohio State on Tuesday night, tomorrow night, is going to be hugely important.